We've had gun laws on the books for I don't know how many decades, right? Since the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I can tell you that in 29 years, I never arrested anybody for a gun crime where they legally bought the gun. Now, I'm not speaking for all police officers, of course, but that was my personal experience. I never found gun owners per se to be any special category of criminal. I did find that most criminals that we dealt with, especially gang members, people committing violent crimes, robberies, drug dealers, they didn't buy guns legally.
Hey, if you own a gun in California, you should have an attorney that specializes in California gun laws on your speed dial. Because if you ever have legal matters that involve firearms, you need California's firearm lawyer, John Dillon, especially if you have questions about red flag laws, gun registration, gun transportation, or maybe you just need to know that your guns are California compliant. Our trusted firearms attorney is John Dillon. John Dillon specializes in California gun laws. Put his number on your phone right now, 760-642-7150, 760-642-7150. Do it now.
Okay, our first guest we just introduced in the intro segment, but I'd like to reintroduce Mr. John Russo. How are you, sir?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Thanks for coming. So tell us a little bit about you. What's your background?
Well, I was a police officer for 29 years. Worked for Escondido PD. Mm-hmm. Had a great career there. Got to do a lot of neat things. I was retired as a sergeant. I was a detective, worked sex crimes and homicide. I was a sniper on the SWAT team.
Oh, wow.
But my passion has always been teaching firearms.
Yeah.
I've been teaching firearms for over 27 years. I have my own private company. I teach CCW classes in San Diego, and I teach classes around the country.
That's nice. Now, what is it, the teaching or the firearms that you like better?
I like the teaching. I've been teaching police, military, civilians, kids for coming up on close to 30 years now, and I love it all. But I got to say the CCW classes have been one of the highlights of my career. I really enjoy teaching citizens self-defense and seeing them get the right to protect themselves.
Now that we can get CCWs, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what was it? Did you spend the whole, you said how many, 29 years?
29 years.
29 years was entirely on Escondido PD?
Yes, sir.
That's amazing. I don't think that happens a whole lot.
Not too much. Usually we get hurt and don't make it the whole distance.
I was going to say, so making it 29 years is an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Making it 29 years on the same department, no matter the department, unless you're like, I don't know, like Mayberry or something, you know what I mean? But like any kind of, most major departments, making it 29 years in the same department is really unusual.
Yeah, it can be.
What got you into law enforcement?
It's funny. As a kid, I grew up in Julian. My dad had a ranch of about 600 acres in the middle of 30,000 acres of private property and cattle ranch. We didn't have a phone. We didn't have electric power. All I knew was guns and hunting and fishing. And at an early age, I knew I wanted to be a police officer.
Wow. So you just went through and
Yeah, I applied as a youngster. I was lucky and got hired right after my 22nd birthday, and spent my whole career at Escondido. So when I got to Escondido, I already had a background in firearms, so it was just kind of a natural career path. So no matter what I did at Escondido, whether I was working as a detective or a sniper on the SWAT team, it was a natural fit for me to be a firearms instructor and an armor and do gun repairs, all that good stuff.
Now, what did you like about Escondido's department?
Escondido's just a great city, and it was a great department. I can't say enough good things about them. I had a blessed career.
Plus, it's close to Julian.
I was close to Julian. Funny thing, I didn't really know much about Escondido when I got hired there. Right. My grandparents lived there, but they passed away in the late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, yeah.
So I hadn't been back to Escondido, for almost 15 plus years by the time I became a police officer there. My family was from the Santee, El Cajon area. So in my mind, as I got hired at Escondido as a young cop, all I could think of was this town's full of one-way streets. How am I going to figure this out? And it's really just about two one-way streets, but it was good.
And how many people, what's the population approximately of Escondido? Are you aware?
It's approximately 160,000.
So here's what kills me, 160,000 people. That's not we kind of think of it like, oh, it's this little town, whatever. That's a city, 160,000 people.
It's big. Yeah,
we have 18 city councils in San Diego County, 18. But kind of all the oxygen gets sucked out of the room by one. That's the city of San Diego, and I think it makes it more confusing because it's, the county and the city are both named San Diego. But if you take Escondido and put it anywhere else in the country, it'd be a fairly major city.
You're correct, as well as the police department. We often, in Southern California, we have so many police departments and so many large police departments, we kind of don't realize what happens around the rest of the country. But the average police department nationwide is under 30 officers. So when you have an agency like Escondido at 150 to 170 sworn, depending on the decade, it's a good-sized agency. It's a 37-square-mile city, so there's a lot going on.
And a lot of people don't realize how many Hispanic communities live in Escondido.
Sure, yeah.
And it's due to all the agriculture. And that group up there, I always joke, though, you have to have a passport to go from San Diego to Escondido. Yeah, Escondido has to have a passport to go from Escondido to San Diego.
Yeah, Escondido's a very good city, very good population. They're very pro-police. They take care of their police department.
The mayor was just at KUSI
Dane?
Saturday. Yeah.
Dane White?
Good.
Yeah, with his
brand new mayor?
Yeah, with his white rimmed glasses.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good dude.
Got to get him some new glasses.
But a lot happens with 160,000 people.
It does. A lot happens.
A lot of like some pretty serious crime. What kind of coordination would you guys do with the sheriff's department and other departments?
We worked well with every department, but I have to give the sheriffs special recognition. They were kind of our close ally. We had a great relationship with them regardless of the division. When I was on SWAT, we worked tight with their SWAT team. We were each other's first call when the other needed backup. When I was a detective, we worked close. When we had big cases that spanned outside of our city limits into the county, we were tight with the detectives.
What surprised us about Escondido? What would you say about the crime in Escondido that maybe we'd be surprised to hear?
I don't know if you'd be surprised to hear it or not, but Escondido is a busy city. It has gangs, it has violence, it has drugs, it has homeless. So, these things are like any other city at this time in our society where they're being dealt with and in some cases amplified and magnified today versus the way they were maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago. But throughout my career at Escondido, we had plenty of murders, plenty of homicides, plenty of rapes, plenty of sexual assaults, gang violence. Escondido had it all, and I'm not bragging about that, of course, but that is just something as a police officer there. I always said, and I did the hiring for Escondido for many years towards the end of my career, but what I always said about Escondido was if you want to be a cop and if you want to actually work and help people, it's a great city to work in because you have plenty of good people who need your help. You have a good, diverse population. You've got some good income and revenue, so the city's able to flourish and take care of their divisions, specifically the police department, in my case. But at the same time, you got plenty of crime. And that's why I say there are other cities that maybe don't get as much action, quote unquote, and a young cop needs that. That's what you want to be a cop for. You want to help people. You want the action, and Escondido had it all.
Well, you don't want to sit at a desk all day long. I drive up there every single week. And I don't notice much homelessness.
No, well, Escondido has a lot of...
Unless I'm going to the wrong parts of Escondido. But, pretty much anywhere you go nowadays, there's you can always find it. You don't have to drive very far east, west, north, south.
It's everywhere.
But I don't seem to see that you guys or Escondido have that big of a problem.
Well, how big of a problem it is relative.
Yeah,
what are we comparing it to?
Say San Diego.
Right. Compared to downtown San Diego, Los Angeles, sure, it's nothing compared to that.
Right.
But compared to the way it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it's probably a lot worse now than it was then. But I will say we've got a great mayor, city council, chief of police. They all work hard. They do well, doing their best to try to deal with it. And homelessness is a huge problem. Right. It's a huge, difficult problem to solve because there's so many different facets to it. It's not a simple problem to just say, oh, well, they're all druggies. Oh, well, they're all, bad people.
Let's all build them houses and let them live in them and they'll be fine.
And the flip side, a lot of people like say, oh, it's all mental illness. It's not. There's no one right answer. There's every facet to the homeless problem, and you can't approach it with just one paintbrush.
Well, look at that one lady that came on and says, I'm spoiled.
Right.
I got everything I need.
Well, and
That's a problem.
that was a big surprise for a lot of people, but
I-
for most working cops, that's nothing new.
Right.
We've known that for decades.
Yeah.
We
Well, how many times
Tell
have you
people what you're talking about. What now?
Well, if you don't mind the shameless plug, KUSI interviewed this lady, and she goes, "I got it made. I get money. I get food. I get, I got a tent. I got everything." She says, "I am spoiled rotten."
She's being provided for by the government.
Exactly. But they're not fixing her problem.
Right.
And she, at this point, doesn't think she has a problem because she's got everything she
And
needs.
John, you're saying cops in Escondido are going, yeah, we know they're being.
We've known that for decades. Now, I'm not talking about the mental health side. The mental
No,
health side
no.
is a whole different animal.
Totally.
Those people truly need our help. But there is an element in the homeless society that simply doesn't want help because it's easy. It's easy when you're provided services. It's easy when you're provided food, shelter, meals, whatever it is you need, and you don't have to do
and
the work.
you live in San Diego.
And that's the other thing. Southern California makes it easy to be
Go to
homeless.
Alaska.
There are many people, and in my career, I spoke to them directly, and they had no problem telling me this, that it takes a lot of work to have a life. To have a job, have a bill, have bills, have a car payment, have a mortgage. That takes work. And some people have decided, I don't want that work.
Well,
I'm
they
okay.
found out they can survive without it.
That's correct.
That's the problem. And then we, as government, all they just do is throw money at it, throw money at it, throw money at it. And then they look at you. I mean, how long? What was it, Governor Newsom? Governor. I like that.
Governor.
I'm gonna
The
start calling
governor.
him
It does
that.
shorten it.
But he just, he mentioned the other day that it's been sent, we've had decades of homelessness. And you've been throwing money at it, and it still hasn't fixed the problem.
Right.
Doesn't somebody want to stop and say,
let's elect him president.
yeah,
So what I want to talk about, we're going to go to a break here in just a minute, but being 29 years, I'm sure things were very, very different 29 at the beginning of 29 years than they were at the end of 29 years.
Sure.
So I want to talk a little bit about that, but I definitely want to work in career law enforcement. What were your thoughts, and what were your colleagues' thoughts, and what was the direction when it comes to gun owners? How were they viewed from law enforcement? What do you think should have been different? How are your feelings about CCW holders and all that good stuff? When we come back, I really want to delve into that and talk more about it. But I can't believe that Escondido, it just baffles me. Escondido is a big city. It just baffles me that Escondido, which is such a nice, inviting place, such a beautiful little town with great places to eat, they have a gang problem. Like it's heartbreaking,
Yeah. And then I want to talk about what do you got? I mean, what's to solve the recruitment problem? Because that
is a
problem.
tough topic.
That's even worse than homelessness. Orange County Gun Owners is dedicated to preserving and restoring Orange County self-defense rights. And if you live in Orange County and want to help defend and restore the Second Amendment, you need to join ocgunowners.com/join. Orange County Gun Owners is the organization to help get more pro-Second Amendment officials elected. Become a member today, ocgunowners.com/join.
So we're talking to current firearms instructor and retired law enforcement John Russo. 29 years on the Escondido PD. One of the things I want to talk about first is how are things different in year one compared to year 29?
Boy, that's a loaded question. That's a big question. Well, first, just some of the intangibles. When I first started my career was 1993, and in Escondido, we didn't have computers in the cars. We, as far as use of force options, we had batons and chemical sprays. At that time, we were just transitioning to OC from Mace. And that was, those were significant changes that happened right after that. We got computers in all the vehicles. We began to get other less lethal force options, such as beanbag rounds, tasers, pepper ball, different things like that. And towards the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a huge push for less lethal options.
Why is that? Why do you think that? What do you, in your memory, what was the push for less lethal?
I think it was a combination of factors. One was there were numerous high-profile incidents in the media of individuals that were shot by law enforcement because they had no other option. One of them was in San Diego with a homeless person with a large, heavy stick. And the officers did a great job. They did everything they could think of to try to stop this person. And finally, the person was presenting a lethal threat to them, trying to hit them with a stick, and they felt that was their only option. I remember at that time, our chief at the time, Dwayne White, great chief, came to me and he said, I don't want that to happen. Actually, I shouldn't say that. He didn't come to me. He came to our entire unit, our firearms training unit, and said, I don't want this to happen at Escondido. I want you guys researching every less lethal option we can. And we did. Escondido has always been at the forefront of new technology, new equipment, and they continue to do so. So we went out and looked at everything. I remember testing net guns and you name it, whatever was out there, we wanted to make sure we put our hands on it. And the taser had just been kind of reinvented at that time, and that's when we brought that to Escondido.
Well, so there are a lot of less lethal options. Less lethal options in general have come a long way in the past 30 years. If someone out there, genuinely and sincerely asks the question, well, gee, could police officers do their job with nothing but less lethal options? Is that what would you say to that? Is there a possibility?
I'd say absolutely not.
And talk about why.
You don't bring a knife to a gunfight. That's the old adage, right? If somebody's trying to kill you with a lethal weapon, whether it's a firearm, a knife, a machete, a less lethal option may be something you can try if you have the right staffing, personnel and tactics. But ultimately, you can't stop somebody with a less lethal option. It's not a guarantee. Shooting somebody with a taser is not a guarantee. If somebody's trying to shoot you and you shoot them with a taser, it may or may not work, but you ultimately may still be shot.
See, I've always looked at this. Whenever you see a police officer, for example, the lady that pulled her gun instead of her taser. Okay. I think that's an adrenaline rush when you're involved in a situation that could be life or death. That's why I think when you see a police officer shoot somebody, it's not one time. It's multiple times, and I think it's don't you kind of think the adrenaline is in the, and you can hear them screaming, when they're yelling and it gets caught on their cameras.
Sure.
And I think that's probably a harder thing to train a police officer, is to be able to how to keep your wits about you in a situation like that.
It is, and that's why it's so important to train. Training is often touted as the problem or the culprit when something goes wrong. So when an officer is found to be at fault and having performed in a negative way, it's pointed at training. They didn't get enough training. They didn't have the tools, right?
Well, even before training, isn't there an element of that assessment that's done prior to employment?
There is. There's a lot of things that go into an officer. But what I wanted to say about training was that it's also one of the first things that are cut. So when budgets get tight,
sure,
they don't get the tax revenue they need.
Right.
What do they cut? They got to cut budgets somewhere, and often it's training, because training costs money.
Right.
It costs money in equipment, but the biggest expense is hours. You've got to send officers to training. Well, when we're short on staffing to begin with, that means they probably are going to go on overtime. So it costs money.
Well, and nobody talks about that.
Right.
You ever noticed it? I mean, if you bring up training, okay, well, we'll do this. Remember the two police officers we had in here? They were females from two different departments, and we weren't allowed to mention the department. I'm not going to mention it now. But if they wanted training, they had to go get their own training on their own nickel. But yet if they got into a situation, it's like, well, you just didn't have training.
Right.
Well, you didn't provide training.
No, and that's a fact. And
I think the public needs to know that.
I was the training sergeant for many years. I was the range sergeant for a couple of decades and in charge of all the firearms training. And, we were very blessed in that even in tough times, we found a way to provide the training.
Right.
But not every agency does that.
And some agencies, you have to buy your own weapon.
You do. Got to buy your own weapon. And like you said, put yourself through training.
And ammo? And ammo?
Some you have to buy your own ammo, sure.
Or they greatly reduce the frequency that you have to qualify to. So
that makes no sense.
No, well.
That makes no sense.
And Alicia made a good point about it starts before training.
Sure.
I've always said, as I said, I did the hiring for many years. If you hire quality people, you're going to have a better product down the road. But if you hire inferior people who don't have the skill sets, don't have the mental capacity, don't have the ethics, that's a big one. Don't have the desire to help people. That's a big thing in law enforcement, is do you truly want to get into this job to help people? And that needs to be at the forefront of your motivation.
Because there's a lot of police officers throughout their whole career never pulled a weapon.
Correct.
Never shot anybody.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
but-
most police officers will never shoot anybody.
That's true.
Police officers in a city like Escondido, for example, they pull their weapon all the time. You
got it.
Yeah, you're not going through your career without pulling your weapon. But as far as firing it, most are not going to shoot their
So
weapon.
let's go
on
back to the question I had before we went to break. With everybody defunding the police and all this ridiculous things, and now we've got ourselves in a situation where it's really tough to try to bring back the force. How do you recruit and stay at that high level that you're looking for? I mean, it's got to be one of the toughest jobs out there right now.
It's incredibly tough. I'll tell you how I did it when I was doing the hiring, and a little story to share with you regarding that. When I got hired in 1993, I was a young 21-year-old at the time. I was going through the application process. And of course, not expecting to be hired. I was just happy to get a job anywhere. I was applying everywhere in the county. At that time in the county in 92, there was kind of a hiring freeze. People weren't hiring. It was tough to get a job. So when I got hired at Escondido, there were 600 of us in the initial application. When I got the job offer, I was first called and told you were number 5. We're only hiring 4 people. Sorry, kid. A week later, I got a call back, said, hey, you got lucky. The number 4 guy lied on his application. You slid into the number 4 spot.
Out of 600.
Out of 600. But here's what I remember about it. The hiring person told me, you better have your act together, kid, because I got 15 guys behind you that I want to hire that are good candidates. We just don't have the spots. And if you mess up, I'll bring one of them in. So I remember that.
Yeah.
Now fast forward 20 plus years. I'm the sergeant doing the hiring.
Wow.
Every test, instead of 600, we'd be lucky to get 100, maybe 150. Out of those, I would have 10 open spots. I'd be lucky if out of that 100, 2 of them qualified. So my speech to them at the beginning of every test cycle would be, look around the room. There's nobody in this room who's your competition. You're your only competition. We've got spots if you're a quality person.
So you have to
the
tell
point
them
of
the
that,
truth. You have to be blatantly honest right up front.
I'm not going to lie to them. I'm going to tell them the truth. These are the qualifications we're looking for. The problem is the people who possess those, and that's where we can get into a sociological and societal debate, is where are those people now?
Right.
Have they stopped existing, or have they just said, I don't want to do that job because I see how society and the media treats law enforcement?
So what do you think it is? Because I remember 20-something years ago, I took the cop test down for SDPD, hundreds of people.
Right.
And they didn't care if I passed the test or not. They had hundreds of people to pick from. So what do you think has changed?
I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of individuals that the top candidates just don't want to be police officers. They see what we're put through. They see what the media puts them through.
And how much money you don't make.
Sure. There's always a financial component. When I was doing the hiring, I hired many people who took a pay cut.
Right.
Who were older in the sense of they weren't a young kid trying to get a job. They were in their late 20s, early 30s. They had a career. They were doing well. Mm-hmm. They were giving up some money to do the job they felt they were called to do. Right. The other problem is, I'll throw it out at social media. There's a lot of components to social media we can blame, but part of that is now the youth of this country are doing stupid things that is documented for life. So now when you try to get a job that has an intense background, there's a lot of evidence of your improprieties that will haunt you.
Social media?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, I didn't know that, Mike.
So,
do you think that? Yeah, I know. Do you think that? There is it used to be that, cops were your friend, and they had a very positive outlook, and now I think that's changed. I think it's fair to say that's changed. Has law enforcement earned any of that? I think that's a tough question, but has law enforcement earned any of the negativity that they've gotten over the last few years?
Here's the thing I'll say about that, because I try to never judge and pass opinions around the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. But you can only, say so much when you see stuff glaring at you on the media, on your news feed, wherever it is. And of course, I'll be the first one to say when you see something on the news, you're not getting the whole story. Right. You're getting the sensational angle. But here's a couple facts. I was one of the first ones to always step forward and be willing to hold an officer accountable, even to the point if we had to fire him. I believe, we should be held to a higher standard and we should ask for the best, but we should treat them as such. When you look around the country, we have such a pervasive media whether it be TV, cable news, social media, Instagram, Facebook, all these different elements that can blast things in a second, to your phone, to your TV, whatever it is, where 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have that. So you're not seeing all that. Now, what I'm saying is not that you're seeing all this bad stuff that was there before in hiding. That's not the case. The case is when you're only showing a sensational angle, that's all the public sees.
Right. And it also helps. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, when we get back, I want to talk about the Imperial Beach thing, but I also want to talk about, are there any gun laws that helped you as a cop? You know what I mean? Basically, I guess what we're asking is, what gun control laws made a difference from your career when you were a police officer? See if we can get an answer to that.
Hey, have you ever wanted to get a pilot's license? Well, here in San Diego, pilots can fly almost every day, which makes San Diego one of the best places to learn how to fly in the world. Learn to fly with San Diego Flight Training International. Check out their deals just for gun owners. Radio listeners, 1 hour of ground school, 1 hour of flight with an instructor. Yep, you get to fly. It's normally $400. We'll do it for $350. Getting started is real easy. Just call them at 858-569-1822 or just go to SDFTI or 858-569-1822.
So Imperial Beach bans retail gun shops. We're going to talk a little bit about that and go over what happened at the city council meeting, and we're going to talk about basically the way it was written in the Union Tribune and what happens from here. But first, I want to finish up with John. So the question is, what gun control laws made a difference from your career as a police officer?
Well, the short answer is not too many. We've had gun laws on the books for I don't know how many decades, right? Since the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I can tell you that in 29 years, I never arrested anybody for a gun crime where they legally bought the gun. Now, I'm not speaking for all police officers, of course, but that was my personal experience. I never found gun owners per se to be any special category of criminal. I did find that most criminals that we dealt with, especially gang members, people committing violent crimes, robberies, drug dealers, they didn't buy guns legally. The guns they possessed were illegal. They were guns that they stole, purchased off the streets, so they weren't your typical American gun owner.
Whoa. Let that sink in for a minute.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Jeez, I never heard that before.
It makes a lot of sense. So what about, real quick, about CCW holders? Generally, in your career over 29 years, what did law enforcement feel about CCW holders?
Law enforcement's a broad topic, but as far as here, the people I worked with, we had no problem with CCW holders. The thing about CCW holders, and I teach CCW classes, and one of the things I tell my students is remind yourself what it took for you to get here. You had to go through a background check. It was a year-long process. So by the time a police officer stops you, they know that. And they know you're a good citizen who has a clean record, who doesn't have any felonies, who has a legal right to possess a firearm. They're not nervous about it. Police officers are nervous about unknown guns. I had someone ask me in one of my classes about a year ago, they knew I was on the SWAT team, and they said, hey, when you were on SWAT, weren't you scared? Or were you ever scared? I forget how they worded it. And it made me think, and I asked a couple of my buddies from the team about it, and we all agreed, no, I don't ever remember being scared on SWAT. And the reason was, by the time we showed up, we knew who the bad guy was, what he was armed with, and there was 20 of us with all the best toys and armor and a tank behind us to solve the problem. But as a police officer, I remember being nervous more than once. It's 2 a.m., you're walking on a dark car, tinted windows, wondering if a gangster's in the back with a shotgun ready to kill you. So that's what makes cops nervous. Once they realize who you are, you're safe, you're a legal gun owner with a permit, they're not afraid of you.
You would think that, I would imagine that if you do show your permit to a police officer that pulled you over, it would probably make them more relieved. I would imagine.
It does. I can't say I can't speak for everybody, but I can tell you that most police officers, once they ascertain that that's your permit, you have a legal permit, they're not. There's no reason for them to be nervous.
Of course.
I got a monopoly. Get out of jail.
There you go.
Card.
Thanks for watching this clip from Gun Owners Radio. If you're watching mainstream media, you're not getting the truth about guns. Gun Owners Radio is the easiest way to stay on top of the Second Amendment fight, the fight for your self-defense rights. You can watch our live stream on YouTube every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, or if you're in San Diego, AM 1170, FM 96.1, The Answer. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform. Just search Gun Owners Radio and you'll find our show. Like and subscribe to help defend and restore the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.